Welcome to the Sleepy Economist. Tonight, we'll explore 20 essential financial concepts that quietly shape the lives of the wealthy ideas that can transform the way you see money. These aren't abstract theories, they are practical principles you can apply to your daily decisions. You'll discover why compound interest is called the eighth wonder of the world, how inflation silently erodes your savings, and why the difference between assets and liabilities can decide whether you grow wealthy or stay stuck. We'll talk about cash flow, diversification, leverage, patience, and independence, the same tools the rich use to build and protect their fortunes. This journey is designed to be both educational and relaxing. You can listen while you rest, let your body unwind, and let these ideas sink in as a calm story. By the end, you'll have a clearer map of the financial world, a set of concepts that can guide your choices, and perhaps even a new sense of peace about money. So, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's begin. Compound interest is often described as the eighth wonder of the world. The phrase is usually attributed to Albert Einstein, though whether he said it or not, the message is clear. Compound interest is one of the most powerful forces in finance, and it quietly shapes wealth in ways most people never realize. At its core, compound interest means earning returns not only on your original investment, but also on the returns that investment generates. It is money that makes money, and then that money makes even more money. Imagine planting a tree. At first it is just a sapling, small and fragile, but with time it grows taller, stronger, and produces fruit. If you plant many trees and let them grow, soon you have an orchard. Compound interest works the same way, slow at first, then faster, and finally unstoppable. Let's start with a simple example. Suppose you put $100 into an account that grows at 10% per year. After 1 year, you have $110. After the second year, you earn interest not just on your $100, but also on the $10 you already gained. So now, you have $121. In year 3, you earn interest on $121, bringing it to $133. After 10 years, your $100 becomes more than $260. After 50 years, it becomes over $11,700. That's more than 117 times the original amount, all without adding a single dollar. Now think about two friends, Alex and Maria. Alex starts investing at 20 years old, putting $200 each month into an account that earns 8% a year. He invests for 10 years, until age 30, and then stops completely. Maria waits. She doesn't start saving until she turns 30, but then she invests the same $200 each month at 8%, and she keeps doing it for 30 years, all the way until age 60. You might think Maria ends with more because she saved for 3 times as long, but in reality, Alex wins. His early start allowed compound interest to snowball for decades, even though he stopped adding money. At retirement, Alex has more wealth than Maria, even though she invested longer. The lesson? Time matters more than discipline. This is why financial advisors say, the best time to start was yesterday. The second best is today. With compound interest, every year matters. The earlier you begin, the less effort you need later. Waiting is the most expensive mistake. But compound interest is not always your friend. It can also work against you. Credit cards are the dark side. Suppose you owe $1,000 on a card with 20% interest. If you pay nothing, after 1 year, your debt is $1,200. After 2 years, it's $1,440. After 5 years, nearly $2,500. A small debt snowballs into something crushing. The same force that grows wealth can also trap people in endless cycles of debt. This is why the wealthy try to keep debt that generates returns, like a mortgage on a rental property, and avoid debt that only consumes, like credit card balances. History is full of examples of compound interest at work. In Renaissance Florence, the Medici family reinvested profits from trade and banking, growing their empire over generations. Their wealth seemed extraordinary, but much of it was simply the slow snowball of reinvested money. In modern times, Warren Buffett has shown the same principle. He started investing as a boy, and by allowing his wealth to compound for over 70 years, he became one of the richest men alive. Most of his fortune was built not in his early years, but in his later decades, as the snowball became enormous. Buffett himself admits that his true secret is not genius, but time. We also see compound interest in everyday life outside finance. Knowledge compounds. Reading one book gives you ideas that make the next book easier to understand. Skills compound. Practicing daily leads to mastery. Even relationships compound. Trust built over years becomes stronger, leading to more opportunities. The principle is universal. Small efforts, repeated and allowed to grow, lead to extraordinary results. How can you apply this in your own life? Start small, but start now. If you can save $100 a month in an investment account that earns 8%, in 40 years, you'll have nearly $300,000. Increase that to $300 a month, and you end with close to $900,000. The exact numbers depend on markets, but the principle holds. Consistent saving, left alone, becomes massive wealth over time. The key is patience and discipline. Avoid withdrawing, avoid chasing quick wins, and let the snowball roll. Here's another everyday example. Imagine two people, both 25 years old. Emma invests $5,000 one time into the stock market and never adds again. Jake, on the other hand, waits until 35 to invest, and then adds $5,000 every year until he's 65, who ends up with more. Surprisingly, Emma often comes out ahead, even though she only invested once. Her early start gave her money decades to compound, and Jake could never catch up. This shows that in finance, starting time is often more powerful than total contributions. Inflation is often called the silent thief. You don't see it, you don't hear it, but over time it quietly steals from your wallet. One day, you go to the store and realize that the bread you bought last year for $2 now costs $2.50. The same product, the same size, but a higher price. That difference is inflation, the general rise in prices across an economy. It may seem small year to year, but like compound interest, it builds over time. Imagine a grandfather telling his grandson that when he was young, a soda cost only 10 cents. The boy laughs, thinking it's a joke. But it's true. Over decades, prices have climbed steadily. The dollar buys less and less as the years pass. Inflation is the reason your grandparents' stories sound unbelievable, and it is why money left idle loses its power. Let's make this simple. If inflation is 3% per year, that means that what costs $100 today will cost $103 next year. In 10 years, it will cost about $134. In 20 years, $181. That doesn't sound dramatic at first, but think of it in terms of savings. If you keep $10,000 under your mattress, in 20 years, its purchasing power will shrink to the equivalent of about $5,500 in today's money. You didn't spend it, you didn't lose it, but inflation eroded it. History is full of extreme examples. In Germany after World War I, the Weimar Republic experienced hyperinflation. Prices doubled not in years, but in days. A loaf of bread went from costing a few marks to millions. People carried banknotes in wheelbarrows, and children played with stacks of money as if they were building blocks. Savings built over lifetimes became worthless. The economy collapsed not because people lacked paper money, but because the money itself lost trust. Another example comes from Zimbabwe in the early 2010s. Hyperinflation reached astronomical levels at its peak. Prices doubled every 24 hours. Banknotes with denominations in the trillions were printed, yet they couldn't buy a simple meal. When trust in currency disappears, society suffers deeply. Inflation, taken to extremes, is not just inconvenient, it is destructive. But not all inflation is catastrophic. In fact, most economies aim for a small, steady level of inflation, around 2% per year. Why? because mild inflation encourages spending and investment. If prices are expected to rise slowly, people prefer to use their money rather than let it sit. This movement keeps economies alive. Deflation, the opposite of inflation, can be equally dangerous. When prices fall year after year, people delay spending, waiting for better deals. Businesses earn less, jobs are cut, and economies spiral downward. So, a little inflation is considered healthy. For everyday life, the key is to understand how inflation impacts you. If your savings grow slower than inflation, you are losing money in real terms. For example, if a savings account pays 1% interest, but inflation is 3%, you are effectively losing 2% of your purchasing power each year. This is why simply saving is not enough. To protect yourself, you need to invest in assets that grow faster than inflation stocks, real estate, or inflation-protected bonds. Let's use a household example. Imagine Sarah keeps $1,000 in a jar at home. Over 30 years, inflation averages 3%. By the end, her $1,000 buys what only $400 would today. Now imagine her brother Tom invests $1,000 in a simple stock market index fund that averages 8% returns. After 30 years, Tom has more than $10,000. While Sarah's money shrank, Tom's grew. The difference between them wasn't effort, but understanding. Tom's money outpaced inflation, while Sarah's was eaten by it. Inflation also shapes behavior in subtle ways. Have you noticed how products sometimes shrink in size but keep the same price? A bag of chips has fewer grams. A chocolate bar is slightly smaller. This is called shrinkflation. Companies use it to hide inflation, giving you less for the same cost. You might not notice, but over time, your money buys less. Governments and central banks watch inflation closely. Too much, and people lose trust. Too little, and economies stagnate. They adjust interest rates, control money supply, and influence spending to keep inflation stable. But even with all this management, inflation never disappears. It is a constant force like gravity pulling on every dollar. For investors, inflation is both a risk and an opportunity. If you buy a bond that pays 5% interest but inflation rises to 6%, your real return is negative, you are losing ground. On the other hand, assets like real estate often rise with inflation. Rents increase, property values grow, and the owner's wealth is protected. Stocks, too, in the long run, tend to outpace inflation because companies can raise prices along with costs. This is why wealthy people often hold assets rather than cash. They know inflation is always at work, and they position themselves so that it works in their favor. Every choice we make comes with a hidden price. Economists call it opportunity cost, the value of what you give up when you choose one option over another. Most people think about costs in terms of money, how much they spend at the store, how much a vacation costs, how much a car payment will be. But the true cost of any decision is not only what you spend, but also what you lose by not choosing something else. Imagine you have $100. You can spend it on a fancy dinner, or you can invest it in a savings account. If you choose the dinner, your opportunity cost is the growth that $100 could have earned over time. If you invest, your opportunity cost is the joy and memory of the dinner you didn't have. Every choice has two sides, what you gain and what you forfeit. The concept may sound abstract, but it plays out in daily life constantly. A student who chooses to spend an afternoon watching movies instead of studying pays the opportunity cost of lower grades. A professional who stays in a safe but low-paying job misses the opportunity of higher earnings elsewhere. A business that invests in one project gives up the chance to pursue another. The cost is not always visible, but it is always there. History is full of striking examples. Think of Christopher Columbus. He spent years convincing monarchs to fund his voyage west. Portugal said no. England said no. Spain finally said yes. For Portugal and England, the opportunity cost of saying no was enormous, missing the chance to discover and colonize the Americas. Their choice cost them centuries of influence and wealth. One decision, one missed opportunity, changed the balance of power in the world. Or consider technology. In the 2010s, companies like Blockbuster faced a choice: invest in digital streaming or continue with DVD rentals. They chose to stay with what worked. Their opportunity cost was Netflix, a company that rose to dominate entertainment while Blockbuster collapsed. The cost of sticking with the old was missing the new. Opportunity cost is also deeply personal. Imagine two friends, Emma and Lucas. Emma saves $200 a month starting at age 22. Lucas decides to wait until he's 32 to start, promising himself he'll save more later. Both earn the same return on their investments. By retirement, Emma has nearly twice as much as Lucas, even though she contributed for fewer years. The opportunity cost of Lucas's delay was not just the money he didn't save, but decades of lost compound interest. The hidden cost of waiting was enormous. This principle explains why wealthy people often make decisions differently. They don't just ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "What is the opportunity cost of this choice?" If they spend on one luxury, what investment are they missing? If they invest in one company, what other companies are they ignoring? Their wealth grows not because they are always right, but because they understand that every yes is also a no to something else. Even time has opportunity costs. Every hour you spend on one activity is an hour you cannot spend on another. Watching television instead of exercising, working overtime instead of being with family, sleeping instead of studying. These are all choices with costs. The richest resource we have is not money, but time, and opportunity cost reminds us to treat it carefully. Here's a practical way to apply this concept. Next time you make a financial decision, ask yourself, what else could I do with this money? If you buy a $50 pair of shoes, that's $50 not invested, not saved, not used for something else. If invested over decades, that $50 could become hundreds. Is the immediate pleasure worth the long-term cost? Sometimes it is. Life is for living too, but awareness is the key. Another example. Imagine you're offered two jobs. One pays $60,000 a year, steady and safe. The other pays $70,000 but requires moving to a new city. The opportunity cost of staying in the first job is the extra $10,000 a year you're giving up, along with the potential career growth in the new city. The opportunity cost of taking the second job is leaving your friends and comfort behind. Neither choice is wrong, but both have costs beyond the obvious. Economists also use opportunity cost to explain why countries trade. Suppose one country is excellent at producing wine, and another is excellent at producing cloth. If each tries to produce both, they waste resources. But if each specializes and trades, both benefit. The opportunity cost of not trading is efficiency lost. This simple principle, discovered centuries ago, still underpins global trade today. 4. Assets versus liabilities. One of the simplest but most powerful distinctions in finance is the difference between assets and liabilities. On paper, it looks obvious. An asset is something you own, a liability is something you owe. But in practice, the line between the two can be tricky, and understanding it clearly is often what separates the wealthy from those who struggle financially. Let's start with definitions. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket or that can increase in value over time. Examples include stocks, rental properties, or a business. A liability, on the other hand, is something that takes money out of your pocket. Debts, car loans, credit card balances, or even possessions that constantly cost money to maintain. Here's a simple way to think about it. An asset feeds you, a liability eats you. Take the example of a house. Many people believe their house is their biggest asset. But is it? If you live in it, pay a mortgage, taxes, maintenance, and it doesn't generate income, some argue it is actually a liability. Yes, it may appreciate in value over decades, but until you sell it or rent it out, it is mostly money flowing out, not in. Contrast that with a rental property. The same house, but rented to tenants, becomes an asset because it generates cash flow. Same object, different role depending on how it's used. This is why the wealthy often think differently about possessions. A luxury car may look like a status symbol, but financially, it is a liability. The moment you drive it off the lot, its value drops. It requires insurance, maintenance, fuel. It never puts money back in your pocket. An inexpensive used car, while less glamorous, may be less of a liability. The rich don't just ask, "What can I buy?" They ask, "Will this put money in my pocket or take it out?" History shows us that civilizations also wrestled with assets and liabilities. In ancient Rome, land was considered the ultimate asset. It produced crops, livestock, and rents. Wealthy families passed estates through generations, ensuring steady income. Meanwhile, debts were dangerous liabilities. Many Roman citizens fell into slavery because they couldn't repay loans. To them, the distinction between assets and liabilities was literally the line between freedom and bondage. In modern times, companies are judged the same way. Their balance sheets list assets and liabilities. Investors examine these carefully. A company with more assets than liabilities is healthy, able to grow and withstand shocks. A company drowning in liabilities may collapse, even if it looks successful on the surface. The same principle applies to individuals. Someone with a big salary but also big debts may look rich, but financially they are fragile. Another person with modest income but strong assets, investments, properties, savings, may be far wealthier in reality. Think about two friends, David and Laura. David buys a brand new car for $50,000, financed with a loan. Every month, he pays $600, plus insurance and upkeep. The car loses value every year. Laura, instead, takes $50,000 and buys shares in a diversified stock index. She still drives her old car, but her investment grows slowly over decades. At the end of 20 years, David has a car worth a fraction of its price, long paid off but with nothing to show for the thousands he spent. Laura has an investment portfolio worth perhaps double or triple her initial money. David spent on a liability, Laura invested in an asset. Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, popularized this idea. He argued that the middle class often confuses liabilities for assets. They buy bigger houses, nicer cars, fancier gadgets, thinking they are building wealth, when in reality they are piling up expenses. The rich, in his view, focus relentlessly on buying assets, things that generate income and grow in value. It's a mental shift that changes everything. But the line isn't always sharp. Sometimes a liability can turn into an asset. For example, taking out a loan to buy a rental property is a liability on paper, but if the rent more than covers the loan payment, the net result is positive. Similarly, student debt is a liability, but if the education increases your earning power significantly, it can become a kind of asset. Context matters. On a personal level, here's how you can apply this. Look at your monthly expenses. Which of them are tied to assets and which to liabilities? If most of your income goes toward maintaining liabilities, you will struggle to build wealth. If, instead, you direct money toward assets, your financial life changes. For instance, buying the latest phone every year is a liability, constant outflow with no return. Buying shares in a company that makes phones is an asset. It may generate dividends and appreciate in value. 5. Diversification. There is an old saying, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." That phrase captures one of the most important principles in finance diversification. At its core, diversification means spreading your investments across different assets so that no single failure can ruin you. It is protection against uncertainty, a shield against the unpredictability of life and markets. Imagine two farmers. The first plants only corn. If the season is good, he earns a fortune. But if pests arrive or the weather turns harsh, he loses everything. The second farmer plants corn, wheat, and vegetables. If the corn fails, he still has wheat and vegetables to harvest. He may not earn as much in a perfect season, but he is far less likely to starve in a bad one. That is diversification. In finance, The same principle applies. If you invest all your money in a single company and that company fails, you lose everything. But if you spread your investments across many companies, industries, and countries, the risk of total loss drops dramatically. Even if some investments do poorly, others may do well, balancing the outcome. History gives us countless lessons about diversification. In 17th century Holland, during the tulip mania, many people poured their life savings into tulip bulbs, believing prices would rise forever. When the bubble burst, fortunes vanished overnight. Those who had diversified into land, trade, or other assets survived. Those who bet everything on tulips were ruined. In modern times, think of the Enron scandal in the early 2000s. Many employees invested not only their savings, but also their retirement accounts entirely in Enron stock. When the company collapsed in scandal, they lost jobs, pensions, and savings all at once. Their mistake was not just trusting Enron, it was failing to diversify. If they had held shares of other companies, the disaster would not have been total. Diversification can take many forms. At the simplest level, it means owning different kinds of assets. Stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, and cash. Each responds differently to economic conditions. When stocks fall, bonds may rise. When inflation rises, real estate or gold may hold value. By holding a mix, you reduce the impact of any one scenario. But diversification goes deeper. Within stocks, for example, you can spread across industries, technology, healthcare, energy, finance. You can also spread across countries. An investor holding only American companies is vulnerable to a crisis in the US, but one who holds European, Asian, and emerging market stocks is more resilient. The global economy ensures that not all regions move in the same way at the same time. Diversification is not only about finance, it is also about life. Consider careers. Someone who builds skills in only one narrow field may struggle if that field disappears. Someone who diversifies their skills, learning, communication, technology, creativity, leadership, has more options and resilience. Or think about relationships. Depending entirely on one person for happiness is risky. A diversified social life with family, friends, and community brings stability. The principle applies far beyond money. But let's return to practical investing. Imagine Sarah and James, both with $10,000 to invest. Sarah puts everything into a single technology stock. James puts his money into a broad index fund of 500 companies. After 10 years, Sarah might be richer if her stock soared, but she might also have nothing if the company failed. James may not see spectacular highs, but he is almost guaranteed steady growth, because diversification smooths the extremes. Over decades, James is likely to be more secure, while Sarah's fortune depends on luck. Diversification does not mean eliminating risk entirely, it means controlling it. There will always be ups and downs in markets, but diversification ensures that no single failure destroys you. The wealthy understand this. They rarely gamble everything on one asset. Instead, they spread their wealth across businesses, stocks, properties, and even countries. They know that the future is uncertain, and diversification is the closest thing to insurance. There are also limits. Over-diversification, spreading investments too thin, can dilute returns. Owning hundreds of stocks individually, for example, may be inefficient. The key is balance. Enough diversification to reduce risk, but not so much that you lose focus. Index funds and ETFs, exchange-traded funds, are popular because they provide broad diversification in a simple package. 6. Cash flow. If wealth were a living organism, cash flow would be its heartbeat. Income and expenses flowing in and out of your life determine whether you are growing stronger or slowly bleeding. Many people look only at their salary or at their net worth, but cash flow, what comes in versus what goes out, tells the real story of financial health. At its simplest, cash flow is the movement of money in and out. Positive cash flow means you earn or receive more than you spend. Negative cash flow means your expenses exceed your income, and you are digging a hole. It sounds simple, but the impact is profound. Take two families. The first earns $100,000 a year, but spends $110,000 thanks to credit cards and loans. The second earns $50,000, but spends only $40,000. On paper, the first family looks richer. They drive new cars, live in a big house, go on vacations. But their cash flow is negative, and they are heading toward crisis. The second family, though modest, has positive cash flow. They save, invest, and slowly build wealth. In time, the second family surpasses the first. This is why wealthy people often say, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep. Businesses live and die by cash flow. A company can be profitable on paper but still collapse if cash doesn't arrive in time to pay employees and bills. History is full of firms that look successful but failed because money got stuck in unpaid invoices or tied up in inventory. For this reason, investors often say cash flow is king. Profit may be theory, but cash is reality. Consider a personal example. Imagine Anna runs a small bakery. She sells $10,000 worth of cakes in a month. But if her customers pay late and her suppliers demand cash up front, she may not have money to buy ingredients or pay staff. Despite high sales, her business could fail from poor cash flow management. This is why successful entrepreneurs track every inflow and outflow with care. Cash flow also explains why assets and liabilities matter so much. A rental property, for instance, is only a true asset if the rent exceeds expenses. If the property costs $1,000 a month to maintain but generates $1,200 in rent, the $200 difference is positive cash flow. If it generates only $800, it is a liability because the flow is negative. This is why smart investors focus less on the sticker price of an investment and more on the cash flow it generates. The concept extends to everyday life. Think of your bank account as a river. Money flows in from your salary, side jobs, or investments. It flows out through rent, bills, groceries, entertainment. If more flows in than out, the river rises, building a reservoir of savings. If more flows out, the river runs dry, leaving you vulnerable. One fascinating historical example is the gold rush in 19th century California. Thousands rushed to dig for gold, hoping to get rich. Few succeeded, but who consistently generated positive cash flow? The merchants selling shovels, supplies, and clothing. They didn't rely on striking gold, they created steady inflows from those who tried. Their wealth grew not from luck, but from reliable cash flow. Positive cash flow also provides freedom. If your inflows cover your outflows comfortably, you can save, invest, and take opportunities. Negative cash flow traps you in constant stress, chasing bills, borrowing, and losing options. Many people with high incomes live paycheck to paycheck because they allow expenses to match or exceed their earnings. Meanwhile, people with modest incomes but disciplined spending build security. How can you improve your cash flow? First, increase inflows. Earn more through career growth, side hustles, or investments. Second, control outflows. Reduce unnecessary expenses, track spending, and avoid lifestyle inflation, the tendency to spend more as you earn more. Even a small gap, maintained consistently, becomes powerful when compounded over time. Here's a simple illustration. Imagine Mark earns $3,000 a month and spends $2,800. His positive cash flow of $200 seems small, but invested monthly at 8% for 30 years, it grows to over $280,000. If Mark increases his positive cash flow to $500 by trimming expenses and earning a little more, the final amount exceeds $700,000. Small adjustments in cash flow create enormous differences over time. Psychologically, managing cash flow gives peace of mind. Knowing that inflows cover, outflows reduces stress, helps you sleep better, and makes you more confident about the future. This is why financial advisors often start by asking clients to build a budget and track cash flow before anything else. Without this foundation, no wealth strategy can last. 7. Leverage. Leverage is one of the most powerful tools in finance, but also one of the most dangerous. At its core, leverage means using borrowed resources, usually money, to increase your potential returns. The idea is simple. With leverage, you can control more than you could with your own capital alone. But while leverage can multiply gains, it can also multiply losses. Understanding how it works is essential to mastering the language of money. Let's begin with an everyday example. Imagine you want to buy a $200,000 rental property, but you only have $40,000 saved. Without leverage, you cannot buy it. But with a mortgage, you put down the $40,000 and borrow $160,000 from the bank. The property is now yours, and tenants pay you rent. If the property rises in value by 10% to $220,000, your $40,000 investment has grown by $20,000, a 50% return. Leverage turned a modest gain into a huge one. But here's the danger. If the property falls 10% in value to $180,000, your equity shrinks from $40,000 to $20,000. A small decline became a huge loss. The bank still demands repayment, regardless of your situation. This is leverage at work. It magnifies outcomes in both directions. History shows both sides of leverage clearly. In the 1,920 seconds before the Great Depression, many investors bought stocks on margin, borrowing heavily to amplify gains. When the market rose, they felt like geniuses. When the crash came in 1929, the borrowed money destroyed them. Banks collapsed, fortunes evaporated, and leverage was a central cause. Yet used wisely, leverage builds empires. Real estate is the classic example. Most homeowners use mortgages leverage to buy property they couldn't afford otherwise. Over decades, rising values and inflation work in their favor, and the debt becomes manageable. Similarly, businesses often borrow to expand, build factories, or invest in growth. Without leverage, many industries would have grown far slower. A famous modern example is Elon Musk. In building Tesla and SpaceX, he used leverage not only in money but in partnerships, technology, and even reputation. By convincing others to invest, lend, or believe, he multiplied his reach beyond his personal wealth. This is a broader view of leverage, using other people's money, skills, or resources to achieve more than you could alone. Leverage is not only financial. Time can be leveraged too. Hiring employees, delegating tasks, or automating systems are forms of leverage. Instead of doing everything yourself, you use others' time to multiply your productivity. Technology is another form of leverage. A single person with a smartphone can broadcast ideas to millions, something impossible a century ago. Knowledge itself is leverage. Once you understand a system, you can do far more with less effort. In personal finance, the key is to distinguish between good leverage and bad leverage. Good leverage is debt or borrowed resources that generate income greater than the cost of borrowing. For example, using a mortgage to buy a rental property that earns more than the loan payment. Bad leverage is debt that only funds consumption credit cards, payday loans, or borrowing to buy luxuries. The former builds wealth, the latter destroys it. Consider two friends, Emma and Lucas. Emma uses $20,000 to buy a car outright. Lucas uses the same $20,000 as a down payment on a rental property worth $100,000, financed with a mortgage. Tenants cover the payments, and over time the property grows in value. In 20 years, Emma's car is long gone, while Lucas owns a valuable asset. Both spent the same $20,000, but Emma used it on a liability. Lucas used it with leverage to create an asset. Leverage also teaches humility. It can tempt people into overconfidence. In the 2008 financial crisis, banks and investors used extreme leverage to bet on housing markets. When prices fell, the leverage magnified losses so greatly that the global system nearly collapsed. Those who had borrowed too much were wiped out. Those who had been cautious survived. Leverage reveals character, It rewards discipline and punishes greed. How can you use leverage wisely in your life? First, ask, will this debt or borrowed resource produce income or value greater than its cost? If yes, it may be good leverage. Second, use moderation. Too much leverage, even on good assets, creates fragility. Third, diversify. Don't rely on a single leveraged bet. Spread the risk. Finally, always have a buffer. Life is unpredictable, and leverage leaves little room for error. A practical tip: if you use credit cards, treat them as tools, not as leverage. Pay them off monthly to avoid interest. If you carry balances, you are using leverage in reverse, letting banks profit from you. Instead, seek leverage where you are the one in control. 8. Net worth. When people talk about being rich, they often focus on income, how much someone earns each month or each year. But income is not the best measure of wealth. The true measure is net worth, the value of everything you own minus everything you owe. Net worth is the clearest snapshot of your financial position. The formula is simple. Net worth equals assets, liabilities. Assets are what you own: cash, investments, property, businesses, even valuable possessions. Liabilities are what you owe: mortgages, loans, credit card debt, student debt. Subtract one from the other, and you see what you're truly worth financially. Consider two people. Sarah earns $200,000 a year but spends lavishly. She has a luxury home with a big mortgage, expensive cars with loans, and large credit card balances. When we calculate her net worth, her debts nearly cancel out her assets. On paper she looks successful, but her net worth is fragile. Meanwhile, Daniel earns only $70,000 a year. He lives modestly, avoids unnecessary debt, and invests steadily. Over time, his savings grow, his debts shrink, and his assets accumulate. His net worth becomes far greater than Sarah's, even though his income was smaller. This example shows why focusing only on income is misleading. Wealth is not what flows in, but what remains after everything flows out. History also illustrates this principle. During the Gilded Age in America, many industrialists flaunted immense incomes from railroads, steel, and oil. But when debts and liabilities were counted, some of them were far less wealthy than they appeared. On the other hand, figures like Andrew Carnegie, who reinvested profits and avoided over-leveraging, built net worths that endured for generations. Their true power came not from flashy incomes, but from solid balance sheets. Why does net worth matter so much? Because it measures financial resilience. High income with low net worth is like a castle built on sand. It looks grand but collapses under stress. Strong net worth is like a fortress. Even if income stops temporarily, assets protect you. This is why financial advisors often encourage people to track net worth over time. Watching your net worth rise is like watching your security and independence grow. Let's bring this into everyday life. Imagine a young professional, Emma, who has $50,000 in student loans, $5,000 in credit card debt, a car worth $15,000, and $10, 0 inches savings. Her net worth is negative. Assets of $25,000 minus liabilities of $55,000 equals $30,000. Many people start adulthood this way. It may feel discouraging, but it's also motivating. Each payment toward debt, each increase in savings, improves net worth. Tracking progress turns abstract goals into visible victories. Now consider retirement. Two retirees both receive $40,000 a year in pensions. The first has no other assets. The second owns a home outright, plus investments worth $500,000. Who is wealthier? Clearly the second, because net worth gives him flexibility, options, and security. If emergencies arise, he can draw on assets. Net worth creates peace of mind in ways income cannot. Businesses think the same way. A company may generate billions in revenue, but if its liabilities outweigh its assets, it may go bankrupt. Investors study balance sheets closely to judge health. The same applies to individuals. Banks decide loan approvals based not only on income, but on net worth, whether you actually own more than you owe. One interesting fact: many wealthy people keep their incomes modest relative to their assets. Warren Buffett, for example, has an annual salary of about $100,000 from his company Berkshire Hathaway, a modest income by executive standards. But his net worth is in the tens of billions because of the assets he owns. This illustrates the point. Income may be small, but net worth tells the real story. How can you build your net worth? The formula is simple, though not always easy. Increase assets, reduce liabilities, grow what you own, shrink what you owe. Save and invest steadily. Avoid high-interest debts. Buy assets that appreciate: stocks, bonds, on real estate, instead of spending on liabilities that depreciate: cars, gadgets, luxury items. Each decision shifts the balance in your favor. Here's a practical step. Once a year, sit down and calculate your net worth. List your assets: cash, investments, property, retirement accounts. List your liabilities: mortgages, car loans, credit cards. Subtract liabilities from assets. The number might surprise you. For many, it's lower than expected. But the act of tracking creates awareness, and awareness creates change. Over time, you'll see the number grow, even if slowly, and that progress is motivating. 9. Risk management. Money, like life, is never free from risk. Markets rise and fall, economies boom and crash, companies succeed and fail. Risk is the ever-present shadow of opportunity. To grow wealth, you must take risks, but to keep wealth, you must manage them. Risk management is the art of protecting yourself from the unexpected, while still allowing room for growth. Let's start with the basics. Risk is the possibility that reality turns out differently from what you expect. You invest in a stock, expecting it to rise. The risk is that it falls. You buy a home, expecting prices to climb. The risk is that they drop. You start a business, expecting profit. The risk is that customers don't come. Risk itself is not bad, it is simply uncertainty. But unmanaged risk can destroy fortunes. History provides powerful lessons. In 1912, the Titanic was called unsinkable. Wealthy passengers felt safe, but the ship struck an iceberg and sank. The risk was underestimated. In finance, similar disasters occur when people believe markets are invincible. In 2008, banks thought housing prices could never fall nationwide. They loaded up on risky mortgages, confident in safety. When prices dropped, the system collapsed. The lesson: never ignore risk. Risk management does not mean avoiding risk altogether. Without risk, there is no return. Even holding cash has risks. Inflation erodes it slowly. The key is balance. Take enough risk to grow, but not so much that failure wipes you out. The wealthy understand this balance deeply. One tool is diversification, which we discussed earlier. By spreading investments, you reduce the chance that one failure destroys everything. Another tool is insurance. Just as car insurance protects against accidents, financial insurance, such as options or hedging, protects against losses. Even ordinary life insurance is a form of risk management. It transfers the financial risk of death to an insurer. But risk management is not only financial. Consider health. A person who eats poorly, never exercises, and ignores sleep is taking huge risks with their future. Medical bills, reduced earning ability, and shortened lifespan are financial consequences of personal risk. Managing risk means caring for health, relationships, and knowledge, as well as money. A practical example: imagine Emma and Lucas both invest $100,000. Emma puts it all into a single startup company. Lucas divides his money: $40,000 in stocks, $30,000 in bonds, $20,000 in real estate, $10,000 in cash. If the startup fails, Emma loses nearly everything. Lucas, however, loses only a portion. and his other assets keep him stable. Emma chased high reward without managing risk. Lucas grew slower, but more securely. Risk also has a psychological side. People often fear losses more than they value gains. This is called loss aversion. It explains why some avoid investing altogether, keeping money in cash that shrinks to inflation. Ironically, their fear of risk creates another kind of risk. Wise risk management acknowledges psychology. It sets rules like never investing more than you can afford to lose to protect against emotional decisions. History gives us inspiring examples of disciplined risk management. During World War II, the Allies launched D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. The risk was enormous. Failure could have prolonged the war for years. Yet planners managed risk carefully. Deception campaigns, weather analysis, backup plans. They could not eliminate risk, but they reduced it enough to succeed. Investors can learn the same. Don't hope for certainty, prepare for uncertainty. In personal finance, managing risk often starts with building an emergency fund, cash set aside for unexpected events like job loss or medical bills. Without this cushion, even small risks can derail long-term plans. Another step is keeping debt manageable. High leverage amplifies risks dangerously. A modest downturn can crush the over-leveraged, while the cautious survive. Businesses use risk management constantly. Airlines hedge fuel costs by locking in prices in advance, protecting against price spikes. Farmers use futures contracts to secure stable income, even if crop prices fall. Investors hedge portfolios with options. Each of these strategies accepts some cost in exchange for reduced uncertainty. Here's another angle. Sometimes the biggest risk is doing nothing. A person who avoids investing entirely because it's risky takes the hidden risk of inflation. Their savings lose power each year. By avoiding one risk, they embraced another. True risk management weighs all risks, seen and unseen, and chooses wisely. 10. Time value of money. One of the most important principles in finance is the time value of money. It sounds technical, but the idea is simple. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. Why? Because money today can be used, invested, or saved to earn more money, while money tomorrow has lost the opportunity to grow. Imagine this scenario. Someone offers you $100 today, or $100 1 year from now. Which do you choose? Most people intuitively pick today. Not only because of impatience, but because they know they could invest that $100, and by next year it would be worth more, maybe $105 or $110, depending on the return. The time between now and then gives today's money greater power. This principle underpins almost every financial decision. Lenders charge interest because they give up money today and must be compensated for waiting. Investors seek returns because they delay consumption today for greater consumption tomorrow. Even simple choices, like paying off debt early, hinge on the time value of money. Let's look at history. In ancient Mesopotamia, lenders charged interest on grain and silver loans precisely because of the time value of money. A farmer who borrowed seeds in spring repaid after harvest with extra. The lender demanded more than he gave, not out of greed, but because he lost the ability to use those seeds during the growing season. Thousands of years later, the logic hasn't changed, only the numbers have. Consider a modern example. Sarah has $1,000 and invests it at 8% annual return. After 1 year, she has $1,080. After 10 years, she has about $2,159. After 30 years, more than $10,000. The $1,000 today grows because of time. Now imagine she waits 10 years before investing. She misses out on early compounding and ends with far less. The lesson: every day money sits idle, it loses potential. The time value of money also explains why people prefer salaries today rather than promises tomorrow. If your employer said, "We'll pay you double in 10 years instead of paying today," most would decline. They know inflation, uncertainty, and opportunity costs make delayed money less valuable. Trust in the future is never perfect, and the present always holds more certainty. This principle is also why debt can be so dangerous. If you borrow $1,000 today with 20% interest, you must repay $1,200 in a year. The lender values today's money more than tomorrow's. For you, the opposite occurs. Tomorrow's money feels heavier because it carries the cost of waiting. Understanding this can change how you see borrowing and lending. The time value of money is central to investing. For instance, retirement planning uses present value and future value calculations. If you want $1 million at retirement, how much must you invest today? With an 8% return, about $215,000. If you wait 10 years, you'll need nearly double that amount. The longer you wait, the more expensive the goal becomes, because time, the most powerful ally, is slipping away. Psychologically, this concept teaches discipline. Humans are wired for instant gratification. We prefer a smaller reward now to a larger reward later, but the wealthy train themselves to reverse this instinct. They see the value of delaying consumption, knowing that money today, invested wisely, multiplies tomorrow. This mindset shift from spender to investor is at the heart of wealth building. Let's illustrate with an everyday decision: buying coffee. A $5 coffee today could instead be invested. Over 30 years at 8% return, that single cup could grow into more than $50. One coffee seems small, but repeated daily, it represents hundreds of thousands in future value. The time value of money turns small daily choices into massive long-term consequences. Businesses also rely on this principle. When companies evaluate projects, they calculate the net present value, the worth today of money expected in the future. If future cash flows don't outweigh today's costs, the project is rejected. This ensures businesses use money in the most efficient way, valuing time as much as dollars. History gives us another example. During the Age of Exploration, European powers invested heavily in voyages to the New World. The upfront costs were enormous ships, crews, supplies, but they expected future wealth in gold, silver, and trade to outweigh today's expenses. The risks were high, but the time value of money justified the gamble. Those who invested early, like Spain and Portugal, reaped enormous returns, while latecomers missed the compounding benefits of early exploration. So how can you use this principle? First, act quickly with savings and investments. Don't wait for the perfect time. Every year of delay makes future goals harder. Second, evaluate spending not just by price, but by lost future value. Ask, what could this money grow into if invested instead? Third, use debt carefully, knowing tomorrow's repayment always costs more than today's borrowing feels. 11. Behavioral finance. Money is not only about numbers, it is about psychology. If humans were perfectly rational, we would always save wisely, invest logically, and avoid costly mistakes. But we are not. Our decisions are shaped by emotions, biases, and instincts that often betray us. Behavioral finance is the study of how psychology influences financial choices and why understanding your own mind may be just as important as understanding the stock market. Let's begin with a simple example. Imagine you invest $1,000 in a stock. It rises to $1,200. You feel excited, maybe even brilliant. Then, it falls back to $1,000. You feel disappointed even though you're at the same point where you started. This is called loss aversion. The pain of losing feels stronger than the joy of gaining. Psychologists say losing $100 hurts about twice as much as gaining $100 feels good. This bias makes investors sell too quickly when they see losses, or hold on to bad investments hoping they will bounce back. Another bias is herd behavior. Humans are social creatures. When others are buying, we feel safe buying too. When others panic and sell, we feel pressure to do the same. This explains bubbles and crashes throughout history. During the dot-com boom of the 1990 seconds, people rushed into internet stocks, often without understanding them. Prices soared beyond logic. Then, when the bubble burst, panic selling spread like wildfire. Herd behavior magnified both the rise and the fall. Overconfidence is another trap. Investors often believe they are smarter than the market. They trade frequently, thinking they can outguess others. But studies show that frequent traders often earn less than those who simply buy and hold. The belief in personal genius blinds them to risk. Even professionals fall victim. In 1998, Long-Term Capital Management, a hedge fund run by Nobel Prize winners, collapsed spectacularly because of overconfidence in complex models. Behavioral finance also studies anchoring the tendency to fixate on a reference point. Suppose a stock was once $100 but now trades at $50. Investors may think, it used to be $100, so it must be a bargain. But the past price says nothing about its real value today. Anchoring blinds us to current reality. Similarly, shoppers buy items on sale because they are discounted from a higher price, even if the new price is still expensive. Another powerful force is mental accounting. People treat money differently depending on its source or purpose. For example, someone may splurge with a $500 tax refund, but be strict about $500 from their paycheck, even though the money is identical. Or they may keep large savings in a bank earning little interest while carrying expensive credit card debt. Logically, they should use savings to pay debt, but mental accounting separates the two. History offers striking lessons in behavioral finance. During the South Sea bubble of the 18th century, investors poured money into a company with vague promises of riches. When the mania peaked, even Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientific minds, lost a fortune. He reportedly said, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of men." His brilliance in physics did not protect him from herd behavior and greed. Modern studies confirm these tendencies. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman showed how humans rely on shortcuts, or heuristics, that often mislead. For example, availability bias makes us judge risks by what we remember easily. After hearing news about plane crashes, people overestimate the danger of flying and underestimate the far greater risk of driving. In finance, hearing about friends striking it rich in crypto may tempt us to invest blindly, ignoring real probabilities. So, how can you protect yourself? The first step is awareness. Recognize that your brain is wired with biases. The second step is building systems to counter them. For instance, automate savings and investments, so decisions aren't driven by mood. Diversify, so no single bad choice ruins you. Set rules like never investing money you can't afford to lose. And most importantly, focus on the long term, resisting the daily noise that triggers emotional reactions. Practical example. Imagine Emma invests in the stock market. She checks prices every day, the ups and downs stress her out, and she reacts emotionally, selling low and buying high. Lucas, on the other hand, invests steadily, rarely checks prices, and lets compounding work over decades. Emma's emotions sabotage her returns. Lucas's calm discipline builds wealth. Behavioral finance explains the difference. It's not knowledge, but psychology. Interestingly, behavioral finance doesn't only explain mistakes, it also shows opportunities. If most people panic in downturns, a calm investor can buy assets cheaply. If most chase fads, a disciplined investor avoids bubbles. By understanding the psychology of crowds, you can position yourself on the other side of mistakes. 12. Financial independence. For many people, the idea of wealth means luxury cars, mansions, designer clothes. But true wealth is not about spending more. It is about needing less. Financial independence is the point at which your assets generate enough income to cover your living expenses, so you no longer depend on a job or a paycheck. It is freedom, the ability to decide how to spend your time without money dictating your choices. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing you never again have to work for money. You might still choose to work, start businesses, or follow passions, but the pressure is gone. That is financial independence. At its core, financial independence is built on a simple equation. When passive income is greater than or equal to expenses to financial independence. Passive income can come from investments, rental properties, dividends, royalties, or businesses that run without your daily effort. Expenses are your cost of living, housing, food, transportation, healthcare, entertainment. The lower your expenses and the higher your passive income, the faster you reach independence. History shows examples of this principle in action. Aristocrats in ancient Rome and medieval Europe lived on rents from land holdings. They did not work jobs, their estates generated income. In modern times, wealthy families live off investments, trusts, and businesses. But financial independence is no longer reserved for the elite. With discipline, ordinary people can reach it too. Consider the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early. Followers save aggressively, often 50-70% of their income, and invest it. By living below their means and letting compound interest work, they aim to retire in their 30 seconds or 40 seconds instead of their 60 seconds. Their goal is not luxury, but freedom. Some live frugally, others build passive income streams. What unites them is the desire to own their time. Let's make this practical. Imagine Emma spends $40,000 a year. She has investments generating $20,000 in dividends and rental income. She still needs a job to cover the gap. But if she grows her assets to generate $40,000 or lowers her expenses to $20,000, she achieves independence. Notice that financial independence depends not only on income, but on expenses. A millionaire who spends $200,000 a year is not independent if their assets only generate $100,000. Meanwhile, someone with modest needs but solid passive income may be free with far less money. A classic tool to measure this is the 4% rule, based on research from the Trinity study. It suggests that if you withdraw 4% of your investment portfolio each year, it can last indefinitely, adjusted for inflation. For example, if you want $40,000 a year to live on, you need $1 million invested. That portfolio, withdrawn at 4% annually, supports your lifestyle without running out. This is not perfect. It depends on market conditions, but it gives a clear target. Financial independence also changes psychology. Without dependence on a paycheck, a fear of losing a job disappears. You can negotiate better, take risks, or walk away. Time becomes your ally, not your enemy. The stress that dominates many lives, the monthly bills, the fragile job security fades. Instead, you gain confidence and peace. But the path is not easy. It requires 3 habits: save, invest, and control expenses. Saving means consistently setting aside a portion of income. Investing means putting it into assets that grow stocks, real estate, and businesses. Controlling expenses means resisting lifestyle inflation, the temptation to spend more as you earn more. Each dollar saved and invested is a worker that earns for you forever. History also warns us about the opposite dependence. In the Industrial Revolution, many workers lived paycheck to paycheck. They had no assets, no savings, no independence. When factories closed, they starved. Their lives were dictated entirely by employers. Today, millions still live this way. Financial independence is the antidote. It breaks dependence on others and restores control. Let's bring it closer to home. Imagine Lucas and David, both earning $70,000 a year. Lucas spends $65,000, saving little. David spends $40,000, saving $30,000 annually. After 10 years, David has invested $300,000, compounding into much more. Lucas has little to show. David reaches financial independence decades before Lucas, not because he earned more, but because he managed better. The gap was not income, but habits. Another example, Sarah decides to buy a rental property. The rent covers her mortgage and expenses, leaving her $300 in monthly cash flow. That's $3,600 a year of passive income. One property won't make her independent, but 5 or 10 will. Over time, she builds streams of income until her job becomes optional. Step by step, her freedom grows. 13. Liquidity. In finance, wealth is not only about how much you own, but how quickly you can use it. That is the essence of liquidity, the ease with which an asset can be converted into cash without losing value. Liquidity is the difference between being rich on paper and actually having money to pay your bills, seize opportunities, or survive emergencies. Let's begin with an example. Imagine Sarah owns a house worth $500,000. On paper, she looks wealthy. But if she suddenly needs $20,000 for a medical emergency, she cannot sell one room of her house. Selling the entire property may take months, and she may have to accept a lower price. Her house is valuable but not liquid. Meanwhile, Tom has $20,000 in a savings account. His total wealth is smaller, but his liquidity is higher. When the emergency comes, Tom is ready. Liquidity is about flexibility. Cash is the most liquid asset. Stocks and bonds are generally liquid too. You can sell them quickly in most markets. Real estate, collectibles, or private businesses are far less liquid. They may be worth a lot, but accessing that value takes time. History gives us powerful reminders of liquidity's importance. During the Great Depression in the 1930 seconds, banks collapsed and people rushed to withdraw savings. Many found the banks had no cash assets, were tied up in loans or investments. The lack of liquidity deepened the crisis. Those with liquid cash survived better than those whose wealth was locked away. A more recent example is the 2008 financial crisis. Banks and institutions held trillions in mortgage-backed securities, assets that seemed safe. But when panic spread, no one wanted to buy. Suddenly, these assets became illiquid, and institutions collapsed. Wealth that seemed solid evaporated because it couldn't be accessed in time. Liquidity, or the lack of it, determined survival. For individuals, liquidity often decides whether a financial shock is manageable or catastrophic. Suppose Emma loses her job. She has investments in retirement accounts and property, but little cash. Without liquid funds, she cannot pay rent or bills, and she is forced to sell assets at bad prices. Meanwhile, Lucas, with an emergency fund of 6 months' expenses in cash, weathers the storm calmly. The lesson is simple. Assets matter, but liquidity saves you in the short term. This is why financial advisors often recommend building an emergency fund before heavy investing. The emergency fund is liquid cash or near-cash savings accounts, money market funds that you can tap instantly. It may not earn high returns, but its value lies in availability. Like oxygen, you only notice its importance when it's gone. Liquidity also explains why some assets command higher returns. Investors demand higher potential profits for locking money away. For example, real estate or private equity often promises higher returns than bonds because your money is tied up for years. The lack of liquidity is a cost, and investors expect to be compensated. On a practical level, think of your own balance sheet. If most of your wealth is in illiquid assets, you may look wealthy but feel stressed. A millionaire with everything tied up in real estate may struggle to pay bills. A modest saver with cash on hand may feel more secure. Liquidity is about control, not just size. Here's a simple illustration. 2 friends, David and Laura, both inherit $100,000. David invests all of it in a rental property. Laura splits hers. $70,000 in investments, $20,000 in savings, $10,000 in cash. When David's car breaks down, he struggles. He cannot sell a piece of the property to cover the repair. Laura, however, pays with savings easily. David may grow wealth faster long term, but Laura is safer in the short term. The balance between growth and liquidity is key. Liquidity also affects businesses. A company can be profitable but fail if it cannot pay suppliers or workers on time. This is why companies track not only profits, but also liquidity ratios, measures of whether they have enough liquid assets to meet short-term obligations. Investors study these closely. A company without liquidity is a company on the edge. In everyday life, liquidity gives opportunities. Imagine a market crash where stock prices fall sharply. Many panic. But those with liquid cash can buy assets cheaply and profit when recovery comes. In this way, liquidity is not only protection, but also power. The wealthy often keep dry powder cash reserves ready to deploy when opportunities arise. Psychologically, liquidity provides peace. Knowing you have accessible money reduces anxiety. Emergencies feel less threatening. Risks feel more manageable. Without liquidity, every unexpected event feels like a crisis. This is why liquidity is sometimes called financial breathing room. 14. Debt. Debt is one of the oldest financial tools in human history, and one of the most controversial. Some people fear it, avoiding it at all costs. Others embrace it recklessly, drowning in obligations. The truth lies between. Debt is neither good nor bad, it is a tool. Like fire, it can warm your house or burn it down. At its core, debt means borrowing money today in exchange for a promise to repay in the future, usually with interest. The lender provides money now, and you commit to returning more later. Debt allows you to access resources you don't yet have, giving you leverage to act sooner, but the cost is future obligation. History shows debt's dual nature clearly. In ancient Mesopotamia, farmers borrowed seeds from temples each spring, repaying with harvests. When crops failed, debts piled up, and many became enslaved. To restore order, rulers often declared debt jubilees, forgiveness of obligations. Debt created both opportunity and bondage. Thousands of years later, the same patterns repeat. In modern life, debt takes many forms. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards, business loans, government bonds. Each serves a purpose, but each carries risk. A mortgage allows you to buy a home you could not afford outright. Student loans give access to education. Business loans fund expansion. Used wisely, these debts can generate income greater than their cost, what some call good debt. But credit cards, payday loans, and consumer borrowing for luxuries often become bad debt, draining wealth rather than building it. Consider two friends, Emma and Lucas. Emma uses a loan to buy a rental property. The rent covers the mortgage and leaves profit. Over time, the property rises in value. Her debt helped her grow an asset. Lucas uses a credit card to fund vacations and gadgets. He pays high interest, and his balances grow. His debt funds consumption, not investment. Emma used debt as a tool, Lucas as a trap. This distinction explains why the wealthy often embrace debt. They see it not as danger, but as leverage. By borrowing at low interest to invest in high-return assets, they multiply wealth. Corporations do the same, issuing bonds to fund factories, research, or acquisitions. Governments borrow to build infrastructure, schools, and defense. Debt fuels progress. But the dark side is always present. Too much debt creates fragility. The 2008 financial crisis showed this vividly. Banks and households borrowed excessively against rising home prices, assuming values would always climb. When prices fell, debts remained, and collapse followed. Leverage magnified the pain. Debt, once a tool, became a weapon against its holders. Psychologically, debt also weighs heavily. Carrying obligations creates stress, limits freedom, and reduces options. Someone deeply in debt cannot easily quit a job, move cities, or take risks. Their future is mortgaged to their past. This is why financial independence often begins with paying down high-interest debt. It is the quickest way to buy back freedom. Culturally, attitudes toward debt vary. In some societies, borrowing is seen as shameful, a sign of weakness. In others, it is normal, even celebrated. In the US, credit scores determine access to loans, apartments, even jobs. Managing debt responsibly is part of modern identity. In Japan, by contrast, cultural norms historically emphasized avoiding debt to maintain honor. Different attitudes, same principle. Debt shapes lives everywhere. How can you distinguish good debt from bad? Ask one question. Will this debt create income or value greater than its cost? A mortgage on a rental property that produces cash flow, good debt. A student loan for a degree that increases earnings, potentially good debt. A car loan for a luxury vehicle that depreciates, bad debt. A credit card used for dinners, vacations, or clothes, bad debt, unless paid off monthly. Another key is interest rate. High interest debt, like credit cards charging 20% or more, is toxic. Even small balances snowball into crushing burdens. Low interest debt, like a 3% mortgage, may be manageable, especially if inflation and asset growth outpace the cost. The difference is enormous. Let's bring this to everyday life. Imagine Emma owes $10,000 on a credit card at 20% interest. If she pays only the minimum each month, it may take decades to repay, costing far more than $10,000. Meanwhile, Lucas borrows $10,000 at 4% interest to invest in equipment for his small business. The business earns $3,000 profit annually. His debt creates value greater than its cost. Same number, opposite outcomes. History offers dramatic warnings. In ancient Rome, citizens often fell into debt traps, losing land and freedom. In the Middle Ages, kings borrowed heavily to fund wars, often defaulting and leaving bankers bankrupt. In modern Argentina, repeated government debt crises have led to inflation, poverty, and social unrest. Debt mismanaged destabilizes not only individuals but entire nations. 15. Budgeting. Budgeting is often seen as boring, restrictive, or even unnecessary. Many people resist it, thinking, "I make enough, why track every dollar?" But the truth is simple. A budget is not about limiting your life, it's about giving your money direction. Without a budget, money slips away unnoticed. With one, every dollar works for you. At its core, a budget is a plan. It shows how much money comes in, how much goes out, and where it goes. It transforms vague intentions, "I should save more," into concrete action. "I will save $500 this month by cutting dining out." It is control, clarity, and awareness. History shows the power of budgeting. Ancient kingdoms kept detailed records of harvests, taxes, and spending. Without them, empires risked collapse. The Egyptians tracked grain to ensure food supplies for years of drought. The Romans recorded taxes to fund roads and armies. Even then, leaders understood: no budget, no stability. In modern times, households face the same principle. Families who budget know where their money flows, adjust when needed, and build security. Those who don't often drift into debt, wondering where the paycheck went. The act of writing things down, income, rent, groceries, utilities, entertainment, reveals patterns invisible in daily life. Consider two friends, Emma and Lucas. Both earn $4,000 a month. Emma tracks every dollar. She saves $800, invests $500, spends $2,700. Lucas ignores budgeting. He spends freely, assuming his income will cover it. At the end of the month, Emma has progressed toward goals. Lucas has stress and credit card balances. Same income, different outcomes. The difference is budgeting. A budget also reveals hidden leaks. Many are shocked when they track spending for the first time. Small expenses, coffees, subscriptions, dining out, add up to hundreds each month. Without awareness, money disappears. With a budget, you see the leaks and choose whether they are worth it. There are many methods of budgeting. The 50 divided by 30 divided by 20 rule is popular. 50% of income for needs, housing, food, bills, 30% for wants, entertainment, travel, 20% for savings and debt repayment. Another is zero-based budgeting, where every dollar is assigned a purpose, nothing left unplanned. The method matters less than the mindset, intentional control over spending. Businesses use the same principle. Companies create budgets to plan expenses, investments, and profits. Governments use national budgets to allocate resources to defense, health, and education. Without budgets, chaos reigns. The household budget is no different. It is your personal government directing your economy. Psychologically, budgeting gives peace. Many fear budgets because they think it means saying no. In reality, it means saying yes to what matters most. If travel excites you, a budget helps you save for it by cutting what matters less. If freedom is your goal, a budget speeds the path to financial independence. It is not about restriction, it is about alignment. A famous example comes from John D. Rockefeller, one of history's richest men. Even as a boy, he kept detailed records of every penny he earned and spent. He grew into a disciplined businessman whose budgeting habits scaled into billions. While most won't reach his wealth, his lesson is universal. Track money, and it grows. Ignore it, and it vanishes. Budgeting also ties directly to other financial concepts. Without it, cash flow slips negative. Without it, debt piles up. With it, assets grow, liabilities shrink, and net worth rises. It is the foundation of financial health. Let's illustrate with a modern scenario. Sarah earns $60,000 a year. Without a budget, she spends on rent, food, shopping, streaming services, eating out. At year's end, she has little savings. With a budget, she identifies $500 a month wasted on things she barely notices. Redirected into investments, that $6,000 a year grows into hundreds of thousands over decades. The only difference was budgeting. Technology makes budgeting easier today. Apps like Mint, YNRB, You Need a Budget, and even simple spreadsheets track automatically. They categorize spending, show patterns, and alert you when you overspend. The excuse of too hard has vanished. Budgeting is now simpler than ever. One hidden benefit of budgeting is reducing arguments. Many couples fight about money. A shared budget creates transparency. Both partners see income, expenses, and goals. Instead of blame, they have a plan. Money becomes a team effort, not a source of conflict. For beginners, the key is simplicity. Start by tracking for 1 month without judgment. Just observe. Then, create categories: housing, food, transportation, entertainment, savings. Assign amounts. Adjust monthly. Over time, it becomes habit. The goal is not perfection, but awareness. 16. Inflation hedge. Inflation, as we explored before, is the silent thief of money. Prices rise, purchasing power falls, and savings shrink over time. But the wealthy rarely fear inflation as much as the average person. Why? Because they know how to hedge against it, how to position their money in assets that protect, or even benefit, from rising prices. An inflation hedge is any asset that maintains or increases its value as prices rise. Think of it as a shield. While inflation erodes cash, hedges resist erosion. Understanding these tools is essential to surviving the long-term effects of inflation. Let's start with the most famous hedge: real estate. When inflation rises, so do the costs of materials, labor, and land. As a result, property values and rents often increase. A landlord can adjust rent upward to match inflation, protecting income. Owning property is like owning a slice of the economy. It rises as the cost of living rises. History confirms this. In the 1972, when US inflation soared into double digits, real estate values climbed too. Those who owned property were cushioned. Those who held only cash watched their savings shrink. The same pattern has repeated worldwide. Land and buildings often hold value when currencies weaken. Another classic hedge is gold. For thousands of years, gold has been seen as money's ultimate backup. When paper currencies lose trust, people turn to gold. In times of inflation, uncertainty, or crisis, gold often rises. During the 1972 inflation wave, gold prices skyrocketed. It doesn't produce income, but it holds purchasing power across centuries. A Roman could buy a fine toga with an ounce of gold. Today, an ounce of gold still buys a fine suit. But hedging has evolved. Stocks, especially those of strong companies, are also powerful hedges. Why? Because businesses can raise prices along with inflation. If costs rise, they pass them to consumers. Over decades, stock markets have outpaced inflation consistently. Someone holding stocks through inflationary periods often emerges wealthier than those holding only cash. Take consumer staples companies, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Unilever. Their products remain in demand regardless of prices. As inflation rises, they adjust prices, and profits hold steady. Investors in such companies enjoy protection. Another hedge is commodities, oil, wheat, metals. These are the raw materials of the economy. As prices rise, so do commodity values. Investors can gain exposure through futures contracts, commodity ETFs, or directly in resource companies. Nations rich in resources often benefit during inflation as their exports rise in value. Governments even issue special tools called inflation-protected securities. In the US, these are TIPS, Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities. Their payouts rise with inflation indexes, guaranteeing purchasing power. Investors who fear inflation can park money here safely. Now, let's bring it into daily life. Imagine Emma saves $100,000 in cash under her mattress. Inflation averages 3% annually. In 20 years, her savings buy what only $55,000 buys today. Half her wealth silently vanished. Meanwhile, Lucas invests his $100,000 in a diversified mix of stocks, real estate, and gold. His portfolio grows with inflation. 20 years later, his wealth has not only survived, but expanded. The difference? Lucas hedged. Emma did not. History also gives dramatic warnings. In Weimar Germany in the 1922, hyperinflation destroyed the currency. Paper money became worthless. But those who held gold, land, or foreign currencies retained wealth. Similarly, in Zimbabwe in the 2002, trillion-dollar banknotes could not buy bread, while hard assets preserved value. In extreme inflation, hedges are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Even in normal times, hedging matters. Inflation of 2–3% may seem small, but over decades, it halves purchasing power. Without hedges, retirement savings erode. With hedges, they endure. How can you build your own inflation hedge? Start with diversification. Hold some assets that rise with inflation, real estate, stocks, commodities. Avoid holding too much idle cash. Keep some liquidity for emergencies, but let the rest work. Practical strategies include owning real estate rental income often adjusts with inflation. Investing in stocks, especially dividend-paying companies with pricing power. Holding some gold or commodities as crisis protection. Using inflation-protected bonds for stable, guaranteed purchasing power. Building skills and income streams because human capital is also a hedge. If you can adapt, earn, and create value, inflation cannot erase your worth. Psychologically, hedging gives peace of mind. Knowing your wealth won't evaporate silently reduces anxiety. It shifts your mindset from fear of the future to readiness for it. 17. Compound growth beyond money. When most people hear compound growth, they think of interest, savings, and investments. But the principle of compounding is far greater than finance. It is a universal force that applies to knowledge, skills, health, and even relationships. Once you recognize it, you see that the same law that builds fortunes also builds lives. Let's start with knowledge. Imagine reading just 10 pages of a book every day. That's small, maybe 15 minutes. In 1 year, you finish around 12 to 15 books. In a decade, more than 150 books. Each book doesn't just add knowledge, it compounds it. What you read today makes tomorrow's reading more meaningful. New ideas connect with old ones, deepening understanding. Over years, this compounding makes the difference between shallow awareness and true wisdom. History gives us vivid examples. Think of Leonardo da Vinci. He wasn't born a genius. He was curious, and he nurtured that curiosity daily sketching, experimenting, learning. His notebooks were filled with small observations that, compounded, became groundbreaking insights in art, anatomy, and engineering. Knowledge compounding across disciplines made him timeless. Skills compound too. A musician practicing 30 minutes a day may not seem impressive, but after years, the skill compounds into mastery. The same is true for athletes, writers, programmers. Each hour builds on the last. What felt impossible in the beginning becomes natural, and progress accelerates with time. Even habits compound. A person who saves a small amount daily soon builds financial stability. A person who eats slightly healthier meals every day builds long-term health. Tiny, repeated actions, compounded, transform lives. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, calls this the power of small gains. Improving 1% daily leads to massive transformation over years. Relationships also follow this law. Trust compounds. Each kept promise, each act of kindness, each shared experience adds layers. Over time, these small deposits create bonds that can withstand storms. Conversely, neglect compounds too. Missed calls, broken promises, forgotten moments add up, and relationships erode. The principle works both ways for growth or decline. Think of businesses. Companies that build customer trust year after year develop loyal bases that compound into dominance. Apple, for instance, built not only products but a brand relationship. Each positive experience compounds, so customers return and evangelize. Small acts, multiplied, create giants. Even health is subject to compounding. Exercising once does little, but regular activity, even modest, compounds into strength, endurance, and vitality. Neglect compounds as well. A single unhealthy meal is nothing, but decades of poor diet compound into disease. Smoking one cigarette is minor, but years of smoking compound into serious illness. The body keeps score, and the score compounds. The wealthy understand compound growth beyond money. They read constantly, knowing knowledge multiplies. They nurture networks, knowing connections deepen over time. They invest in health, knowing vitality compounds. They see compounding not as financial math but as a life law. Let's illustrate with a personal example. Emma decides to learn Spanish. She studies 15 minutes daily. At first, progress is slow, basic words, awkward sentences. After a year, she converses. After 5 years, she's fluent. Meanwhile, Lucas studies in bursts, cramming for a few weeks, then stopping for months. After 5 years, he remains basic. The difference was not intelligence, but compounding effort. History again provides inspiration. Benjamin Franklin famously applied compounding to self-improvement. He created a list of virtues like industry, temperance, humility, and tracked them daily. Over years, small improvements compounded into character. He built habits that shaped not only his personal life but also his legacy as a statesman, inventor, and thinker. Technology accelerates compounding. Today, learning compounds faster thanks to online resources, videos, courses. A coder, practicing daily, not only grows personally, but also taps into communities, accelerating knowledge. Ideas spread instantly, compounding across millions. The digital age multiplies the law of compounding globally. But compounding also warns us. Neglect compounds negatively. Debt grows, bad habits strengthen, wasted time accumulates. The same force that builds wealth also builds ruin if directed poorly. Recognizing this helps steer choices. Ask, are my daily actions compounding for me or against me? 18. Taxes. Few topics spark as much debate, frustration, and misunderstanding as taxes. Some see them as theft, others as the price of civilization. But regardless of opinion, one truth remains. Taxes shape wealth, behavior, and society itself. To master money, you must understand taxes, not only what they are, but how they influence decisions. At their core, taxes are compulsory contributions from individuals and businesses to governments. They fund public goods, roads, schools, defence, healthcare, infrastructure. Without taxes, these services collapse. But taxes also redistribute wealth, encourage or discourage activities, and create incentives. History reveals the central role of taxes. Ancient Egypt collected grain taxes to feed workers building pyramids. The Roman Empire taxed provinces to fund armies and roads, binding the empire together. In medieval Europe, kings levied taxes on trade and land, often sparking revolts when burdens grew heavy. The American Revolution itself was ignited by disputes over taxation. No taxation without representation. Taxes have toppled empires and birthed nations. In modern times, taxes remain powerful tools. Income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, corporate taxes all shape behavior. For example, tax deductions for mortgages encourage home ownership. Lower capital gains taxes encourage investment. High cigarette taxes discourage smoking. Governments use taxes not only to raise money but to steer society. For individuals, taxes directly affect financial outcomes. Imagine Emma earns $100,000. Without considering taxes, she plans her budget. But income taxes reduce her take-home pay to maybe $75,000. Property taxes raise her housing costs. Sales taxes add to purchases. Suddenly, her real disposable income is far less. Understanding taxes helps her plan realistically. The wealthy take this further. They study tax laws, hire experts, and structure assets to minimize burden legally. They use trusts, offshore accounts, real estate strategies, and corporate structures. To them, taxes are not fixed, they are puzzles. This is why many billionaires pay lower effective tax rates than middle-class workers. They use the rules strategically. Consider Warren Buffett's observation. His secretary paid a higher tax rate than he did. How? Because her salary was taxed as income, while his wealth came mostly from investments taxed at lower capital gains rates. The design of tax systems shapes inequality. Businesses also respond to taxes. Corporations move headquarters to low-tax countries. They shift profits across borders. They invest in certain industries because of tax credits. Tesla, for example, benefited from renewable energy tax incentives, boosting its growth. Taxes mold the corporate world as much as profits do. History offers extreme examples of tax burdens gone wrong. In France before the Revolution, peasants carried heavy taxes while nobility enjoyed exemptions. Resentment fueled revolution. In contrast, post-World War II governments built strong tax systems to fund recovery in welfare states and creating stability. Taxes can either unite or divide societies. Psychologically, taxes often feel unfair because they are invisible until payday. People underestimate how much they pay and overestimate what others owe, but awareness is crucial. Someone who ignores taxes may be shocked by bills. Someone who plans saving receipts, maximizing deductions, investing tax efficiently, keeps more wealth. Practical strategies for individuals include: understand tax brackets. Earnings are taxed progressively, not all at the highest rate. Use tax-advantaged accounts, retirement plans, ISAs, 401, IRAs, depending on country. Track deductions and credits education, business expenses, healthcare, dependents. Invest tax efficiently. Long-term investments often taxed less than short-term trades. Plan ahead, avoid surprises by setting aside estimated taxes if self-employed. Taxes also reveal priorities. High taxes on income versus wealth, consumption versus savings, businesses versus individuals all show what societies value. Some nations favor equality with high taxes on the rich. Others favor growth with lower rates. Each system creates different outcomes. For individuals seeking wealth, taxes are both obstacle and opportunity. The obstacle: they reduce returns. The opportunity: by mastering them, you can optimize. For example, real estate investors often use depreciation to reduce taxable income, even while properties rise in value. Entrepreneurs deduct business expenses. Investors hold assets longer to pay lower rates. The rules are complex, but the rewards for understanding them are great. One fascinating angle is how taxes shape time. Because tax rules change, strategies must adapt. What works today may fail tomorrow. Governments constantly adjust laws to balance revenue, fairness, and growth. This uncertainty adds another layer of complexity to financial planning. 19. Leverage. If you had to lift a giant stone with your bare hands, you might fail. But with a lever, a simple wooden pole, you could move it. That is leverage, using tools, resources, or other people's effort to multiply your own power. In finance, leverage is the art of achieving more with less of your own money, time, or energy. At its core, financial leverage means using borrowed money or outside resources to amplify returns. With leverage, you can control larger assets, expand businesses, or accelerate wealth. But just like a lever in physics, the longer it is, the greater the risk if it snaps. Leverage magnifies outcomes, both gains and losses. History illustrates this well. In ancient times, merchants leveraged ships and crews financed by investors. A single merchant could not afford a voyage to Asia, but with backing, he controlled cargoes worth fortunes. The principle remains: today businesses and individuals use leverage to scale beyond their personal limits. Consider real estate. Emma wants to buy a $200,000 property but only has $40,000. With a mortgage, she uses leverage. She contributes $40,000, the bank lends $160,000, and she owns the house. If the property rises to $240,000, she doubles her money. $40,000 becomes $80,000 thanks to leverage. But if the property falls to $160,000, her entire $40,000 is wiped out. The same lever that lifted her can also crush her. Companies use leverage constantly. They borrow to build factories, acquire rivals, or expand operations. If the investments succeed, profits outpace interest and shareholders gain. But if revenues fall, debt becomes a burden. The 2008 financial crisis exposed this danger. Banks and homeowners alike used excessive leverage, and when housing prices fell, a collapse followed. Leverage is not only financial, it exists in many forms. Time leverage, hiring employees or delegating tasks. One person's effort becomes many. Skill leverage, using technology, education, or systems to multiply productivity. Network leverage, partnerships, connections, and communities expanding reach. Capital leverage, using other people's money, OPM, to fund ventures. Think of an entrepreneur. Lucas runs a small bakery. Alone, he bakes, sells, cleans. His income is limited to his hours. With leverage, he hires staff, buys machines, uses loans for expansion. Now dozens bake, machines produce faster, and profits grow. Lucas's success no longer depends solely on his hands, it's multiplied through leverage. The wealthy embrace leverage strategically. They borrow at low interest to invest in high-return assets. They delegate work to employees, freeing time for bigger decisions. They use networks to access opportunities others never see. Every billionaire story involves leverage, financial, human, or technological. History again teaches us. The Medici family in Renaissance Florence leveraged banking not only to grow rich but to influence politics and art. By lending money and managing wealth for kings and popes, they multiplied their power far beyond what gold alone could buy. Leverage created empires, not just fortunes. But misuse is common. Many confuse leverage with guaranteed success. Overconfidence leads to borrowing too much. Trusting growth will continue. When downturns come, leverage turns deadly. Countless businesses, nations, and individuals have been ruined by excessive debt. The lesson is balance. Use leverage, but respect its danger. A practical framework. Good leverage creates assets or income greater than its cost. Example: borrowing at 4% to buy property yielding 8%. Bad leverage funds consumption or assets that don't appreciate. Example: credit card debt for vacations. Excessive leverage stretches beyond safety. Even good investments fail under too much pressure. Everyday example: Sarah invests $10,000 in stocks without leverage. They rise 10% and she earns $1,000. Emma invests $10,000 but borrows another $10,000, doubling her exposure. Stocks rise 10% and she earns $2,000, double Sarah's return. But if stocks fall 10%, Emma loses $2,000, wiping out 20% of her capital versus Sarah's 10%. Leverage accelerated the outcome both ways. Leverage also applies to personal growth. Reading a book is knowledge leverage, learning from years of someone else's experience in ours. Technology is leverage too. One person with a laptop and internet can create content reaching millions. In this sense, leverage is not only financial, it is the multiplier of human effort. Psychologically, leverage requires discipline. The temptation to overuse it is strong. Borrowing creates the illusion of control over large assets, but without caution, it enslaves rather than empowers. Wise leverage means always asking, what happens if things go wrong? If the answer is ruin, the leverage is too high. 20. Legacy. Money is temporary, but what you do with it can outlast you. That is the power of legacy, the impact your wealth, choices and values have on future generations. Legacy is not only about inheritance or estates, it is about how your financial life shapes the lives of others after you are gone. Throughout history, legacies have built dynasties, nations and movements. The Medici family used their fortune to fund art, science and politics, leaving a cultural legacy that shaped the Renaissance. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, spent his later years giving away his wealth to libraries and education, declaring, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." His financial legacy still educates millions today. But legacy is not limited to billionaires. Ordinary families create legacies too. Parents who save for their children's education, who teach discipline and values, who leave a house or business, these acts ripple for generations. Legacy is the story money tells after you stop speaking. At its simplest, financial legacy begins with inheritance, the transfer of money, property, or assets. But inheritance without wisdom can be destructive. Many heirs waste fortunes quickly, lacking discipline. Studies show that most family wealth is lost within 3 generations. The first generation builds, the second preserves, the third squanders. Why? Because legacy is not just assets, it is values. A true legacy combines money with meaning. It teaches heirs how to handle wealth, not just gives it. It structures gifts responsibly through trusts, charities, or guidance, so wealth builds rather than destroys. Families who succeed at legacy focus as much on education as on inheritance. Consider the Rothschild family. For centuries, they preserved wealth by teaching financial discipline, working together, and investing across nations. Their legacy was not only money, but systems, networks, and knowledge. Contrast this with lottery winners, who inherit millions suddenly without structure or wisdom. Most are bankrupt within years. Legacy is the difference between fleeting luck and lasting impact. Legacy also extends beyond family. Philanthropy is legacy using wealth to shape society. Universities, hospitals, foundations, and cultural institutions worldwide exist because someone decided their money should outlive them. These legacies echo across centuries. But legacy is not only financial. Your habits, example, and mindset pass on too. A parent who lives debt-free, invests wisely, and values education leaves a model more valuable than cash. Children absorb behaviors more than lectures. A parent who budgets, saves, and gives creates a culture of stewardship. That culture is legacy. Psychologically, thinking about legacy shifts perspective. Instead of short-term consumption, you think long-term impact. Instead of, how can I spend this? You ask, what story will this tell after me? Legacy thinking deepens meaning. Money becomes not just a tool for personal comfort, but for building something that lasts. Legacy also connects to reputation. Businesses, families, and individuals are remembered not just for wealth, but for how they used it. Rockefeller, criticized in life for ruthless business, is remembered today for philanthropy. Conversely, some fortunes are remembered with bitterness if built or spent poorly. Your choices decide whether your legacy inspires or warns. In everyday life, building legacy can be simple. Start with estate planning, wills, trusts, instructions. Ensure assets pass smoothly. But go further. Write letters, record stories, teach values. Pass down not just money but wisdom. Money without guidance is fragile. Money with guidance is transformative. History warns us about ignoring legacy. Monarchs who spent lavishly left bankrupt states. Families who hoarded wealth without vision lost it to inflation, taxes, or conflict. Legacy must be active, planned, intentional, alive. Legacy also ties into impact. Imagine Emma builds a small business that thrives. She passes it to her children, who continue it. Jobs, services, and community grow. Her legacy is not only wealth but contribution. Lucas, meanwhile, spends freely, leaving little behind. His story ends with him. Emma's continues for generations. You've just journeyed through 20 of the most powerful financial concepts that shape how wealth is built, preserved, and passed on. From the simple clarity of budgeting to the profound depth of legacy, each idea is a piece of the larger puzzle of money. And what becomes clear is this: money is not just numbers in an account, it is energy, freedom, and responsibility. Think back to where we began, the strange history of money, how it evolved, and why it still rules our lives. Every step since has been about understanding the rules of this game we are all forced to play. Inflation, compounding, leverage, risk management, taxes. These are not abstract theories. They are the currents that push or pull every decision you make with money. But here's the truth most people never realize. You don't have to be a genius or a millionaire to make these principles work for you. You only need awareness and discipline. The wealthy are not defined by luck alone. They are defined by the choices they make, over and over, guided by these timeless principles. And here's the beauty. Money compounds, but so do habits. Each small step you take, saving instead of spending, investing instead of hoarding, learning instead of drifting, builds on the last. Over years, the difference is extraordinary. The person who ignores these concepts may look the same today, but in 10, 20, 30 years, the gap becomes unbridgeable. History shows us this clearly. Families, nations, and individuals who mastered these principles thrived. Those who ignored them faded. And yet, unlike history, your future is not written. You hold the pen. Financial independence is not about greed, it is about freedom. Risk management is not about fear, it is about protection. Legacy is not about ego, it is about meaning. Each concept carries a deeper truth. Money is not the goal, it is the tool. The real goal is the life you can build with it, the choices you can make, the people you can help, the impact you can leave. So as you sit here, perhaps relaxed, perhaps even drifting towards sleep, let these ideas sink in. Your financial story is not just about dollars and cents. It is about who you become in the process of mastering them. You don't need to change everything overnight. You don't need perfection. What you need is progress, one step at a time. Read a little each day, save a little each week, invest a little each month. Teach yourself, your family, your children. Apply compounding not only to money, but to knowledge, health, and relationships. Over time, you'll look back and realize you've built something far greater than wealth. You've built stability, peace, and freedom. And remember this: money without meaning is empty, but money with purpose is powerful. As you grow, ask yourself not only how much you earn, but what you stand for, what you give, and what you leave behind. That is the essence of true wealth. So take these 20 concepts and make them part of your life. Revisit them, reflect on them, apply them. Because the difference between those who dream and those who achieve is not intelligence, not luck, but discipline and awareness. And the best time to begin is always today. In the end, The journey of money is the journey of life itself. Both are shaped not by what happens to us, but by how we respond. Both demand patience, wisdom, and courage. And both reward those who respect the laws that govern them. Thank you for spending this time here, for opening your mind and your heart to these ideas. If this video has sparked curiosity, inspired thought, or even just planted a seed, then it has done its job. Because seeds, like money, grow when given time and care. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the calm of knowing you are not powerless in this world of money. You have tools, principles, and strategies. You have history's lessons and your own choices. And you have time, the most valuable resource of all, if you start using it wisely today. This is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. And if you found value here, I invite you to stay with me on this path. Subscribe, return, and continue learning. Because the world of money is vast, fascinating, and deeply human. And together, we will keep exploring it slowly, patiently, thoughtfully, until mastery is not a dream, but your reality. So rest well tonight. Let these ideas settle. Tomorrow, take one small action, and with time, watch how everything changes. Because the secret is simple. Money is not in control, you are.